Let's send a transaction with Solana web3.js in just 3 minutes. So a few weeks ago, I made another video on creating SPL tokens on Solana, which is of course a foundational component of Solana development. So following the trend of kind of covering these fast foundational tutorials to support you as a Solana developer, I want to today talk about sending transactions and just general utilization of Solana web3.js. So to get started, we'll first want to install the Solana web3.js library with Node Package Manager. And we can do that with npm install at solana/web3.js. And now I'm also going to install a base58 library. You don't have to do this if you plan on using an array type private key. But in this case, I plan on using a standard string private key base58 and the type of private key that you get from a Phantom wallet, for example. So to do that, and we'll get into this in a moment, but to do that, we'll need this base58 library to do some conversions. All right, so now that we have Solana web3.js, and in my case, base58 installed, we can go ahead and throw these into base variables in our index file. We'll first define web3, and we'll define our base58 variable as well. So now we'll want to actually connect to the Solana blockchain itself with the connection variable. Let's do this by establishing connection. And then in here, what we'll do is throw in an RPC endpoint. In this case, I'm going to use Chainstack. So I'm going to head over to the Chainstack dashboard, open up a new project, get started, and I'll throw up a Solana mainnet node, select Ashburn, that's the closest to me, next, and join network. We can open this up and grab our endpoint. Now I'll throw it into the string compartment here, and we can move on to establishing the account that we're actually sending the Solana from. So for this, we can go ahead and establish a variable called private key and set this as a new uint8 array. So I'm going to call our base58 object and then the decode method on that object. And here I'm going to throw in an environment variable. So now we can go ahead and derive the account from the private key that we just defined. And we'll define this as web3.keyPair.from secret key. You can see it's finishing it here for me, but from secret key. And then private key is the variable that we just defined. We'll throw in private key here. So I can go ahead and define the account that I'm sending to. In this case, I'm going to generate a fresh account to send funds to. So now I have a new account. And this will of course generate a public key, private key combo. But when you're sending to an address, you only need the public key, which is what we'll be using here. So now I'm going to define an asynchronous function in which we will define our transaction and then push the transaction, throw open some brackets here, and define a transaction object. And we can add an individual transaction onto this object. Now in here, we'll build the transaction itself, system program.transfer. We can first go ahead and define the from public key, account.public key. We can define the to public key. So this is, of course, the account that you're sending to. And then we can define how much Solana we're actually sending. So we define this in lamb ports. In this case, I want to send less than 1 Solana. So I'm actually going to do 0.01 Solana. And then now also in the asynchronous function, we can go ahead and define our signature, which will actually push the transaction to the network. And then here we can do connection, which is of course the provider that we're connecting to. In this case, it's Chainstack for me. Then we can do transaction, which is the transaction object that we defined above. And then here in brackets, I'm going to do the from account that we're sending. So the account that is sending the Solana itself, which in this case will be just account in brackets. All right, so now we've imported our packages, defined a connection variable connecting us to the blockchain, defined our private key, derived an account from that private key, generated a second account to send the Solana to, created a transaction object with the from, to, and value, and then sent that transaction and stored it in a variable called signature. So now we can head over to our console and click on run. So now we can head over to our Phantom wallet, go to recent activity. Another one just popped up. Of course, I've done this a few times now. View it on slow scan. We can see 1 minute ago, success, 0.001 Solana to this fresh account, which has 0.001 Solana in. And that's how you send a transaction on Solana in just 3 minutes.